everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tough Topics in LD. Today we are joined by a special guest, Charlotte Flynn. Hello, Charlotte.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. And Charlotte is a life and career coach. We spent 10 years in education. And she also has a first-class degree in psychology. Charlotte, would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and what's brought you here, please?
Yeah, and first of all, as well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm an avid listener to your podcast. I'm obviously not a physio. I'm not a physio myself, but I just think it's brilliant for anyone, literally anyone. So thank you for producing it. And yes, so as my introduction, I'm Charlotte Flynn. I currently work within a university as a coach. And I also have my own business, which is Charlotte Flynn Coaching. And my real passion is helping people to thrive in times of challenge. So really working with them to discover what their unique strengths are, how they can put them into a career and a life that they love, and working out where they want to be and how to get there. Particularly, I love to coach people who are carers and or siblings to people who are disabled, because that's my lived experience. So I have a wonderful sister, Biz. She is an avid reader. She loves animals, and she is also autistic and has learning difficulties and mental health issues. And so my lived experience helps clients to really connect. And, you know, I've got that deep empathy because I've lived it, and I know the brilliant ups and also the challenges that come with that relationship. So they're a group of people that I work with, and I love what I do, and I love that we've connected over the kind of that joint experience of being siblings.
Yeah, we did. That is how we connected, actually. I think I put a post out there about, was it the John and Al blog or something along those lines? And I think that really sort of, it rang a bell with you. And that's how Charlotte and I, both got in touch. And then we thought, with some behind the scenes chats, we just thought this would be a really, really useful thing at a time when, there's so much going on in the world. There's so much going on in people's private lives to look at. We've got this professional expertise here of somebody who can help us to thrive in times of challenge, which is what we're trying to theme this podcast around, with a link to Siblings Day. How do you see the challenges that are faced by siblings of people who are disabled, within professional and personal practice, or life and career, sorry?
And I think one of the things that I do as a coach with any client is to really delve into what thriving means to them, and also what challenge means to them. And that question is so personal to everyone. So for some people, the challenge might be the fact that they're balancing their work, their life, and their sibling. It could be that the challenge is actually how the world is. So that's my experience, to be honest. The challenge is how the world is sometimes to my sister, and how people can be with my sister. That's the deep challenge I have, and coaching really helped me through that. So I have a coach, and in 2015, that was the first time I had a taste of coaching, and that was what I went to them for, and worked with them with the coach with. I'm very stuttery there, but that's yeah. Okay. So challenge is personal to each client, and I think one of the key things is to discover what that looks like. What are the barriers that are coming with that challenge, and what is it stopping them from doing? Often the challenge can get in the way of something brilliant, can't it? So we think about what that means to them, and how we can. It's not necessarily removing that challenge, but it's thinking about how to navigate that challenge in a way that feels good for them and their sibling. I think a lot of what I do is to make sure that someone can understand their challenges enough so that they can be in a place that feels good, because then that makes us a better sibling, doesn't it? When I'm a better person, I'm also a better sibling.
Perfect. You touched on some of my next question there, Charlotte, and I was just going to go for those that are uninitiated. How would you sort of define what coaching is? And because some people, I think the lines can be a bit blurred between sort of what is sort of the counselling side of things versus what is coaching, and how would you sort of describe that to people who've not come across it before?
Yeah, and this is a great question. So, especially with my coaching, I see it as very future focused and solution focused. So coaching is often, you can delve into the past slightly if it's going to inform the future, but it tends to be really looking forward, working out where you want to be and how to get there. And whereas counselling and therapy, which is also brilliant, and a lot of my clients have counselling and therapy either at the same time as coaching, or they'll have some therapy before they go into coaching. And so that tends to process things that have gone on, really delve into what happened and why. Whereas coaching goes from the place you are now, how you can step into a future that's better for you. And my coaching tends to be around career development as well as life, because I don't think that you can separate those two actually, because they weave so closely together. So it's often based around positive psychology as well. So working from a place of how you can make yourself better. So often, people can view coaching, well, some people think it's just sports coaching, so I actually quite like that sometimes when I say I'm a coach, and then I'm like, right, what can I pretend that I'm good at sports wise? Either they see it as sports coaching, or some people see it as kind of a something that's to prevent something bad happening, or kind of remedial. And actually, my training is in executive coaching, so coaching directors, and they're at the top of their game in a sense, yet they still want to be better. So coaching's there for everyone, and it can really transform. Well, it transformed my life. I mean, it sounds like an exaggeration, but it really did. In 2015, I had coaching, and with coaching, it's not giving advice. And that's something that when you first have coaching, it feels quite different to any other conversation, because we're so used to someone, when we say something that we want to be different, someone jumping in and giving some advice, whereas coaching taps into your own knowledge so that you can create options and a future that's right for you. So in my circumstance, I had quite a serious head injury, which led to me being hospitalized. And so coaching came at a time when that was quite a unique experience to happen. And in a way, people couldn't give advice over what to do because it was so unique. So coaching was brilliant for me because it allowed me to work out for myself what was best. And that's where coaching can really help people to thrive. The other day, actually, someone said, so we'd done the coaching session, and I said, how did that feel for you? What's different? And they said, are you a witch? And I was like, why do you say that? And they said, the things that I've come up with, I never knew that were within me. And that's the beauty of coaching. It's holding space for people to delve into what they already know. And because you're delving into what's right for you, the options that you generate are so genuine because they're connected from within. So I could talk about it all day. I'm a huge fan. I'm a complete psychology geek and coaching geek, and I just think it can have real positive benefits for people.
It sounds incredibly powerful. It really does. So in terms of obviously looking at us and SIBs as siblings, we know that within learning disability practice, there is a higher proportion of people who have a personal connection to people with a learning disability of some shape or form. We know that in the UK, there's around 13 million people who have a personal connection to somebody with a learning disability. And so there are going to be some really challenging times. We're at a point when we're recording when COVID regulations in the UK have just been, removed. Obviously, things are going on in Ukraine. There's obviously lots of change and challenge coming up. People's personal finances is being hit in terms of cost of living increase. We're seeing the largest one in decades. How do you think? What tips could you give to people that in how to negotiate and navigate these sorts of things? The current climate, Charlotte. If you could solve this, with the best podcast in the world, because you'd solved everybody's problems.
And I think when you say all of those things, doesn't that just show the enormity of what we're going through? It really does show just how much. And I think there are lots of different tools and techniques. And I think one of my favorite approaches is to think about almost the two versions of ourselves. So the way that I describe it is that we've got a core version of ourselves. So that core version is thinking about, okay, so what do we need to do? What do we need to make sure that we're healthy and that our mental health is healthy? And what also do we need to care for? So for me, it's caring for my toddler, making sure that my close friends are okay, that my family are okay, that my siblings are okay. And that's the core. And if I was to go through life with just that core, that would be absolutely fine. You know, working out exactly what needs to happen. So that's the core. And then working out what your stretchy is. So what will you do when things are really good, and perhaps when, I don't know, that a day is feeling better for you, and you think, do you know what, I've got a bit more in me than my core. And in your stretchy, you work out, okay, so what's my behavior in my stretchy? What can I do above and beyond? How can I kind of exceed my expectations? And by knowing what your stretchy is, you can then really easily step into that when it feels right to. But equally, on days, you know, like you say, when all of those things just feel really heavy on us, we can go to your core, but you know that that's okay, and you don't feel any guilt from going back to your core, because you know that you're going to be looking after everyone you need to, looking after yourself. But knowing those differences can allow us to be really kind to ourselves as well, to know that we are okay and we can also stretch ourselves. So yeah, that's one of my favorite go-to analogies, and I use that a lot. And I even have a little talking to myself sometimes, and I think, okay, what am I feeling today? And it doesn't even go from day to day. Sometimes it can go from hour to hour. 1 hour, I think, you know what, I can talk to this new person, or I can do something more adventurous on social media. And then other times I think, you know what, it's a core time. I'm just gonna look after my core.
I think it certainly sounds like it's, you know, helping people to develop an awareness of themselves, which is, you know, something that I found hard, knowing where I am. But it's quite interesting to hear that. Obviously, we've not necessarily talked about coaching per se together, but if anybody interacts with Charlotte, you'll know that she does talk about she's a prolific voice note spammer, which is fantastic. You get the dulcet tones through, and the front of the first one she sent me was like, "I'm feeling a bit stretchy today," and I was like, so me being a physio, I'm like, okay, you know, a bit of gymnastics or anything like that. But yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, yeah, I forgot that you probably wouldn't have known what that meant. Yeah, I when I posted about it actually, and I was thinking, will this confuse people even more? Because if they just looked at the diagram, they'd think a core and a stretchy zone. But yeah, I'm talking your language, aren't I? Just yeah, so exactly the same. That, you know, on a stretchy day, we can go a bit further than normally our bodies can let us, and the same with our minds. You know, we can choose when we step into that stretchy zone and when it feels right to. So yeah, I'm glad the analogy links to physio. I can pretend that I'm physio-y, can't I?
Well, look, I mean, this podcast is, you know, is the idea is it's targeted at healthcare professionals across the learning disability practice, whether they be nurse, physio, social work. Shaun, who's not here today, just so happened that Shaun and I were a pair of big mouths on social media, and got drawn together. So, you know, much as, you know, I'm here as a physio today, we know we're here to try and represent, you know, the challenges and commonalities across all areas of learning disability practice, which can be challenging because obviously you don't know what you don't know. But
and I went along.
Go on.
I went along to one of your workshops, as you know, just knowing that you are an expert in this field. Not that it should be a field. I know that that's something that, you know, it shouldn't
terminology.
Even be. Yeah, but you know, you get all of this, and I went along knowing that I would learn things, and I absolutely did. And you know, we can all work together on understanding more so that we can be better to ourselves and to other people, can't we? So, and I think that's great, and that's why I've liked the podcast so much, that you know, it's not you know, there's a nurse and a physio presenting it, but I still get everything you're talking about, and I learned so much about just what a long way we have to go.
Yeah, we do. And what challenges do you think are out there that are different for siblings of somebody with a learning disability over somebody who doesn't have, you know, a sibling who has a learning disability? Are the challenges different inherently? Are they the same? Are they, you know, wolves in sheep's clothing? It just looks slightly different. How would you phrase that?
Yeah, I think all of that actually. I think some of the challenges are exactly the same. So, you know, when I speak to my friends who have siblings who aren't disabled, I can link to them so closely. You know, I get everything. I get those arguments, and I know before we've spoken about kind of, you know, those just being a sibling is being a sibling, and so there's lots of things that are the same. But I think and I think this was why linking up with the Sibs charity for me was so powerful. And I thank you for that, because you told me about Sibs. So they're a charity who support both young siblings and adult siblings. And one of the things that was just the most brilliant thing is that I went along to their whole day for adult siblings. And it was the first time that I'd been in a space, it was an online space, but I was in a space with people who were all siblings. And there's just such a deep empathy, and it shows that there are different challenges. And I think you can only really understand it when you're in it, when you are a sibling of someone who's disabled. And actually, at the weekend, one of my friends was saying, I hadn't quite realised how, what your experience is like. And I think she'd learned a bit more from my work on social media. And she said, I'm sorry that I didn't realise as much. And that, that was such a kind thing for her to say. But I said to her in return, it is absolutely fine, because you just literally can't, unless you're a sibling, you don't, of someone who's disabled, you've just not lived it. And I think that's why clients who are siblings of disabled people who I work with, they just know that I know. And I think there's something quite powerful in that. But going back to kind of what those challenges are, I think, again, linking back to what I said earlier, for me, it's how we navigate the world. We can really see how easy we have it as people who are non-disabled. And I know some siblings of people who are disabled are also disabled themselves, but for me, I'm not disabled, but my sibling is. And I can see so often, so throughout childhood and now as an adult, I see every day the way that I can navigate the world is dead easy and simple. And the way that she navigates the world is not, because of how we're currently set up. I have hope that it will change, and people like you and will make these changes, but at the moment it's not. And that's the thing that I find most hard. And I think a lot of siblings find hard that they love so deeply their sibling, and they have such an empathy for their sibling and all that they experience. And when things are hard, that's really difficult. Equally, I think when things are good, so I can remember really distinct moments in time when people have been exactly the way that people should be with everyone, but particularly with my sister, when she's treated in the way that she deserves, the joy it brings to her for weeks on end is brilliant. And that should just be her every day, but unfortunately it's not. And I think the challenge can often come from having that deep empathy to your sibling and seeing them have a world that's not easy.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you sort of say, we see things differently. And I think that there's only in my adult life have I sort of come to reflect on the things that are different. Because I think growing up, one thing that I personally experienced, and this isn't to apply to everybody, was that I always use the phrase "things just were." I think as kids, we things are, and everything that you experience as a kid is normal, and that's exactly what everyone else experiences. As far it's almost like the theory of mind concept, but to an nth degree. I always think about things that are, that we experience. Of course, I used to go to a Reigate, which was a therapy center for my brother. My brother had physiotherapy, OT, SALT. I just thought it was a great place to go and play. They got lots of cuddly toys. There was a ball pool. I used to do John's physio with him, and there were some funny people there who made lots of jokes, and we used to play games. And that just was. And I was like, well, surely this is, it's just a fun thing that you do. John had, quite some challenges with his health growing up. That meant quite a few emergency hospital admissions. And it was like sometimes I'd get woken up at 2:00 and the bags would be packed and I'd be at grandma and grandpa's, and it's like a little midnight adventure. And I was like, oh, that just is. It's only when you come to later on in life that you start to realize, actually, okay, right, John was severely ill then. Mum and dad needed to get me out of the way because they need to support him. And I think it might be difficult for people to sort of understand that, but if you think about your own Christmas traditions, I always go back to this one. If you struggle to think about things that just are, that are completely alien to other people, think about things that your family do at Christmas, that when you went to somebody else's house at Christmas, you're like, what, you do what? It's almost that
you open your presents at what time?
Yeah, exactly. These rules or quirks or traditions that families have that are so unique to them. It's that same sort of thing, but just in terms of being a sibling. Is that something you can relate to, Charlotte?
Absolutely, and I think that analogy is brilliant, and I can so relate to that. And I think that is where the strengths come. So I'm so passionate about helping siblings and everyone to find their strength. But I think what you talk about, I can relate to that experience. And all of that becomes so part of your everyday, you know, those trips to hospital, that kind of that world that you live in becomes so normal. It then gives you a bit cheesy, and I know often people don't like this, but it gives you the superpower, which is dealing with tough times in a way that's just, you're used to it. And I think that I'm so grateful for the fact that I've had those times when things are in crisis and I've had to, well, I say I've had to, you don't think about it, it just becomes your everyday. And I notice the way that I navigate the world now as an adult, things that seem very unusual to some people are kind of, I'm like, oh, that's normal. And I think there's a real strength in that, knowing that you know how to be in times of challenge because it's just been your everyday.
I think you definitely had that, and I've experienced that, but only on reflection. People have sort of said, "Oh, you know, you dealt with it in a situation. I was a first responder on an accident or whatever, or at work when something's gone wrong." And the feedback is that, you know, actually you deal quite well with that. You dealt well with that in a crisis. You're pretty good in a crisis, and that's not to say, you know, aren't I great? But I think it just comes back to, you know, you don't necessarily process it. You just do. So it's good to hear.
And I think, we were talking with the siblings recently, actually. We were talking about how, is it a sibling thing that when you're walking around, people seem to want to stop and talk to you and kind of tell you your life stories? And I think that's from us having a real skill with communication, because we perhaps have communicated in ways that are needed at particular times, or we've been around people who are brilliantly diverse, which everyone can benefit from being around everyone, can't they? But because we've had that chance to be around more people, we know how to be, and I think people can link to us because of that. So we're joking about the fact, you know, the other day actually I was talking in French to someone because I picked up that they spoke French, and I speak very much Franglais, but you know, I realized that they might enjoy the fact that I could speak a bit of French. And I think that's because I'm used to adapting my communication to be there for other people. And I think that, again, is just part of our everyday. We should be the ones to tweak our ways, because the world is easy for us. So, you know, absolutely we can do something different if it's going to benefit another person.
Yeah, adaptability and communication is one of the key skills in any professional role and in any personal role as well, I think. And I think with professionals, one of the things that is rammed in during our training is that we need to be professional. When it's your job, you need to be rammed into is that you need to be professional. And it's kind of, you know, well, what is professional? And actually, for me, I far more see that authenticity is a better form of professionalism, particularly within physiotherapy, than you know, treating everybody. You know, well, some people think it's the disability advocacy and go, well, I need to treat everyone the same. Well, no, that's, you're missing the point. You're missing the point entirely. You need to be flexible and adapt your approach to the needs of the individual. I'm just thinking, actually, I was share a little anecdote. I was at the park with my daughter Madeline, who's 7, and there was a lad who had Down syndrome there, just happened to be there, and he was playing on his own. And when he went to one area of the park, the kids all moved out of the way. This was only the other weekend, actually. And Madeline, I could see her sort of sat there, and bless her, I think because her uncle had Down syndrome, she was sort of immediately drawn towards this young man, but she didn't know how to start the conversation. So I said, "Oh, do you know what? You know, we'd like to go and say hello." She was like, "Yeah, but I don't know what to say." And I said, "Well, you know some signs, don't you? I've seen him talking to his mummy, and he signs as well." So I said, "I'll come with you," because kids are obviously nervous about introducing themselves to each other. And you know, she said, "Would you want to play?" And he was like, "Yes, please." And then they played for an hour and a half. And actually now, she's got a friend who they're going to meet up at the park. And his face, he was having a good time playing on his own, but then he had an absolute blast just running around the place with Madeline. And I think, you know, she adapted, she changed how she communicated with him. She said, "I used shorter sentences," and this isn't something we'd ever, you know, said to her that she had to explicitly do. But I said to her, "How was it communicating?" She said, "It was tricky at first, but I just, I use single words that those helped. If I knew the sign, I used that. If I didn't, I'd just point or tap on something, and he knew. And it's
And how
no, go on.
And how brilliant is that, and thinking about that, if you were to reflect, which it sounds like you have on that, you kind of, she's identified that that's someone she wants to link with, and it could be for any number of reasons. It could be, like you say, her uncle had Down syndrome. It could be that she particularly liked his trainers or whatever, and there's a link. So they're identifying a link, then working out how she wanted to be and planning that, almost, knowing that she needed some support, like we all do with talking to new people. And then afterwards, she'd reflected and become really self-aware on how to be. And to do that in any conversation is valuable, isn't it? And I think, if we were all doing that more often, the world would be a better place.
I think so.
I think so. Yeah, that's a nice anecdote.
One of the things that I personally feel like, and I've mentioned this phrase to you before, and I think it struck a chord with you, but it's worth mentioning for the purposes of the podcast, was one of the challenges I think that we face as the siblings who have a disability is, I think my way of gaining time and not attention, but positive reinforcement from my parents as growing up was I put myself on what I now term the achievement treadmill. So because John's needs were so high, he was, as I said, very medically complex as a young man, and that meant that he needed a lot of time and attention, and that's completely fine. And I actually benefited incredibly from having a brother with a disability. But one of the things I identify is that I put myself on the achievement treadmill, which is where I would gain positive affirmation from my family by achieving. And then that becomes, then the treadmill gets a bit faster, because then I have to, well, okay, this is how I do. I achieve, and therefore I need to achieve. And that desire and need to be pushing yourself to be always seen to be doing things. And I think that's probably been something that's very helpful in my career, but it does get tiring, and it means that it's very hard to get off. And I think one of the things I identify in as an adult now, is that I've become very good at human doing, but not quite good at being. So if I have time where, I want to sit down for an hour at the weekend, I still now, even though I'm aware of it, and it used to be even worse, have huge pangs of guilt that I could be doing something. I could be achieving, I could be contributing. And is that something that you come across with others? Is that something that resonates with you? And feel free to say no if it's not.
It absolutely is, and when, as soon as you said it, because you use that analogy, and it was just such a light bulb moment for me, and I think we had a big conversation about it, didn't we? Because it was such it put in place exactly how I feel, and I think, like you say, you don't know how to get off, in the sense that when a treadmill's going, I love running, but I hate treadmills, so I also love this as well, because the analogy can kind of work. And to kind of take that analogy a step further, I think when you're running, so I'm weird and I love to run up hills. So I love hill running. I'm from near the Lake District, so kind of explains it. But so I love to run uphill, and you get such satisfaction when you get to either the next rest stop or the summit. You can soak in the views, you can soak in the fact that you're there, you can have a snack. On a treadmill, however, you're never going to get those celebrations, and you're never going to, and I think that can be the feeling that you're going, but you're never stopping to soak in the success, how small or large that may be. And I think that's definitely one of the things that I speak to clients about, and it's thinking about how you can take a break daily, weekly, to really soak in your success, so that you can acknowledge where you are, and you can feel that you're making progress, and then also that you can reflect about what the progress is and whether you've actually wanted it in the first place. I know definitely within my career, I've been on weird, I get that thing of, I need to achieve, I need to be the one who, because it's easy for me, of course I need to, you also feel that you have, for me it comes from kind of that recognition from family, and also that need to, because I can, surely I should but sometimes, I've been on these paths in my career, and then I've suddenly realised that's not even what I wanted. But I'm on it now, and you have to keep on going. So yeah, no, I can so relate to it. And you know what? I text you to say, can I do a post on it? That was months ago, and the reason is I want to get a picture of me on a treadmill, but I hate the treadmill. So I'm still waiting to be able to post it because I just don't want to go on the treadmill. But yeah, and I think it can, like you say, you've got a brilliant career, you've had some incredible opportunities, and that will be partly because of that, won't it? But I think when we're not given permission to stop and reflect about whether it's an achievement path that we want to go on, then that can start to get damaging for our health or for our careers even, because we can end up on a path we're not actually passionate about.
It was certainly something that I personally found was difficult for my mental health as an adult, particularly when I had a daughter, and then that sort of added, well, the number of things that you could be doing to contribute has now increased exponentially. Before it was, do the gardening. Now it's like, well, let's spend some time with our daughter, help her develop, and almost got into a bit of a crisis inside my own brain of, what do I do for the best? Is it focus on my career? Is it focus on my family? Is it do the gardening, the grass needs cutting, the dogs need walking, and those things? And every time I sat down, in the back of my brain was always, you could be doing something. You could be doing something. Then I went to, you should be doing something, because that's how I'd conditioned myself growing up to get, to get that sort of positive feedback. And people may reflect on it and just sort of say, well, it's a bit pathetic, isn't it? But that's honestly me sort of, bearing myself of that's how I dealt with it, rightly or wrongly. Here some kids, may go down destructive paths and may have may I was going to use the phrase act out, but may decide to become a little bit more mischievous to get feedback. So I'm grateful that it's been challenged for what I think is good, I think. But it does have its own inherent drawbacks in of itself.
And then you kind of, we both use that word kind of should, and you did a recent post about when you're like, you were talking about lifting weights, and that you reframed it to kind of, I can. I think it was the backing track, wasn't it, that was saying I can, or I will.
I get to do this, wasn't it? That was
I get to, lovely, yeah. So, and I think by reframing into language like that, we can actually work out in the step of a positive reframe. So going from I should to I get to, that's called a positive reframe. And in doing so, we can work out whether we actually want it. So for an example, if I was saying I should do some more spreadsheets for work, if I was to phrase that to I get to, it wouldn't map onto that. So I realized that actually it's not something that brings much joy, and I don't need to. So you can kind of work out where you want to be. But if you're constantly on that treadmill without taking a step back to reflect, then that can get hard. But yeah, as you say, I'm grateful that I went in the direction that I did, and I'm sure my parents are as well, that we chose the achievement treadmill.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I definitely see it in other siblings. It is something that clients bring.
I like that, and I like how you've taken that, Charlotte, because that was just a little skit that was just saying, it was talking about. I think it's on my Instagram reels, and it just says about, when you look at things of I have to, and actually if you change that narrative and say that I get to, it changes your perception on things, and actually you've taken that a step further and applied that to day-to-day work tasks such as Excel spreadsheets. And it sort of makes me chuckle with the mundanity of it, but actually, like you say, it can be a really useful tool in finding out what is your drive. And that, yeah, I can see how this coaching malarkey point might work. Welcome to Alistair's open coaching session. Everybody.
Yeah, and I think once you start having coaching, it's not just in the session itself. So you also, like you say, you can then take it into different situations, and it's just kind of a toolbox. And that a positive reframe is one of my favorites, and sometimes it's easier to do than other times, but it's often effective.
So what other tools then do you have then, Charlotte, that we can utilize?
Wow, what do you want a tool for?
Very good question. Yeah. If you could sort of summarize, what are your 4 most used spanners?
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, one of the things that I really like as a tool is to work out who your team are. So when because we've both had children. I know lots of people can relate to this term, even if you haven't had children, but they say it takes a village to kind of grow a family or to support a child. And I think it just takes a village to be, just to be an adult, to be a human. It takes a village. And by that, I mean, and the way that I take that is that I actually did grow up in a village. But right now, I don't live in an actual village, but I've created a team or a village around me who I know that I have to go to for different things. So my really dear close friend is originally from Kenya. She moved over here after university, and she talks about her village back home. There's a go-to person for everyone. So there's kind of someone who will be able to advise you on finance. There's someone who will lift you on a time that feels hard. That there's someone who can give you advice about relationships. And she talks about how in her village she feels the well-being's really high because everyone has someone. They're not relying on just a partner or just a friend for everything they need in life. So I think one of the really good things can be to work out your team. So who do you have as your mentor? Who's your go-to practical person? Who's your go-to person for emotional support? And we can have different teams. So you kind of have your work team and then you have your personal life team. But working out who's there for what can be really effective, because then, there are certain people who you might not want their advice, but you love to be around them because they lift you. There are certain people who just don't get being a sibling, and that's fine. I have other people for that. So I think working out your team can be a really effective thing. And that can be applied to work or personal life. Does that kind of resonate with you as a physio, I guess, in your role? Can you when I talk about team, can you visualize who's your person?
Do you know, actually, I was literally just sat there listing people off in my head, in terms of that meet those sort of personal, professional sort of circles. And one thing is, since going self-employed, is obviously that sense of team has been, diminished to an extent, but actually then it's sort of grown exponentially via social media. There are hundreds of people now, like yourself, Charlotte, that I connect with, but I've never met in person. But I still feel like I have really close, positive relationships to, and kinship, that's helpful in both a personal and a professional sense. So yeah, no, it was I was just taking some time there. Sorry if I wasn't engaging, but I was just in my own head just listing off, creating little lists.
Yeah. And I think, working out as well where your team might be lacking. So, if, I'm really active but not sporty. It's a kind of an ongoing joke with my husband, who's a PE teacher. I'm active but not sporty. But if I was sporty, I can imagine that if I was picking a team, I might see that I'm lacking in a certain area. So you'd go out and find a teammate that fills that area. And the same for us in everyday life and in our careers. If we're realizing that actually we probably don't have a mentor, we probably don't have someone who's just slightly ahead of us who we can go to for things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you might think, okay, how can I seek out that mentor? And like you say, that might not be in person, that might be on Instagram. It could be that you find someone who's an expert in your field. And I'm sure you are that to many people. I imagine, your Instagram account becomes a place for people to go for advice. So yeah,
not sure about that, but yeah, I did find a mentor. Actually, I've worked with a lady called Anne Gates of Exercise Works, who's not on Insta, but she's hugely prolific on Twitter, and she is such an effective lady at bringing change at scale. And actually, the first time I met her, it completely blew my mind, because she was like, "Well, Alistair, you need to, you're thinking small here. You're thinking about one or two clinicians. You need to think about populations." And I was like, whoa, hang on a minute. I'm just a physio. She's like, no, you're not allowed to use the phrase just a physio. And she just completely reframed everything. And actually, every time I come out of a meeting with Anne, I sort of, a little bit of smoke comes out the top of my head, because my brain cells have been rubbed together so hard. But it is really inspiring to listen to her talk. Anne's vastly experienced. She's a pharmacist by trade, but is an expert at promoting change, and is worldwidely renowned, at promoting exercise and linking in with medical people. So she's amazing. And yeah, actually, I do need to. You just reminded me that I need to send her an email, so I'm just going to make a quick note of
that. And I'm going to make a note to follow this person. Anne sounds incredible, and it is. we can really strengthen our team around us by seeking out those people who can lift us, both in our careers and in our personal life, because you want to be surrounded by a brilliant team, don't you? So yeah, and people like Anne, they can help us to thrive in such a powerful way.
Certainly. So we've got the who are you team. I like the positive reframing side of things. If you were to give sort of one more thing, because I'm conscious of time, one more thing,
right,
what would you
choose
say
the best one?
Yeah, what would you think? Or you can go for more than one if you want. I didn't want to.
Yeah, no, that's fine. As I say, I can go on about all this all day. So another one I really like is we touched upon it earlier around those successes and kind of really knowing your successes in terms of the achievement treadmill. So being able to kind of soak them in. And I think that's also a tool that can be so useful. So being able to acknowledge what you've already achieved, because so often we're just on to the next thing. So there are some quick and easy kind of practical tips. So while coaching isn't about giving tips, often, you know, on my Instagram, I talk about kind of tips for personal growth. And one of the things I recommend is to have a kind of a portfolio in your mind of your successes. So it could be a physical portfolio. You know, it'd be so good as adults if we could have, you know, the brownie sash, or, you know, with your badges on, but kind of that visual of what we've achieved. And I think so much as adults, we don't collect our successes. But so the way that I do it, actually, I have an email inbox, a separate folder where I collect positive emails, and I call it my emails to look at on a bad day folder. And all of my successes or good feedback goes straight into there. And we can do it in other ways as well. We can have kind of photos on our phone that refer to just times where we were really happy in our personal life. You know, those times where we did this incredible co-steering trip where I just felt so kind of at one with nature and just adventurous. And so I've got photos that I go to. So just really making a conscious effort to collect those achievements, whether it be things that made you feel good or whether it be big successes, and then taking time to actually celebrate, and not just celebrate the ones that are the big milestone, but the milestones in between. And I think it can bolster us. And often when we're then going on to do the next challenging thing, sometimes we get those feelings of doubt, you know, those imposter thoughts, and we can then be tempted to go externally and go to someone and say, can I do this? You know, is this something that I can do? And you kind of go for that external validation. But once you've got your portfolio or your brownie badge or your email inbox or your folder of photos, you can delve into your own achievements and your own successes, and you can remind yourself that you can do it. So you're not relying on that external validation. You're going back to what you've already achieved. And that can be really powerful to prove to ourselves that, yes, you've got a challenge on its way, but you can deal with it.
Wow. I love that. I think we should, I'm going to term a folder in my email inbox called the Charlotte Flynn Sash. And that's going to be my
yes, I love it. Yeah,
with like 2 emails from my mum in there.
I'll have to send you an email so that you can add one in.
Yeah, please. Yeah, there's none right now. I think it's really interesting to hear that, and actually it's something that I think we particularly, I'm now going to put on my physio hat in rehabilitation. You know, particularly when people have had, I work with people who've got traumatic brain injury, but people even who are on a journey of managing lifelong conditions. People want to be at the top of the ladder, and I use the ladder analogy, whatever analogy you want to use to steps. And I know they're not necessarily accessible, but don't at me. We talk about people want to be at the top, and if you want to be at the top, you'll never be happy with being halfway up because you're not at the top. But you won't see the fact that you're now halfway up a ladder, or the rungs that you've gone, or those steps to success. You know, and I spend a lot of time reframing physical progress back to people in a way that sort of says, well, look, these are the objective markers, these are the things that we're testing, you can now do this better, you can do that, whatever. And people actually go, oh, do you know what? Yeah. And actually that can put a real positive spin on where they were feeling down before, because I'm not where I want to be, but actually you're closer than you were the day before. And I think that's something that, you know, without realizing, is something that we're doing from a rehab sense, but it's something that I can apply to my own practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you were talking about that, I thought about my sibling experience. So for her, success is very different. And what you're saying there, I think, is kind of seeing success as it is for that person. and then the journey there. And, you know, success for my sister might be different to my success. And sometimes, you know, she can find life hard because she thinks she should be at a certain way of living and a certain way of life. And I didn't realize I did this until you mentioned that. But I think I'm often going into that mode actually with her of saying, you know, but look at what you are doing, look at where you were compared to now and what's next. And I think you can be tempted to go to what everyone else is doing, and actually it's within you, isn't it? And I think that taking time to celebrate each run of the ladder, if we're going with the ladder analogy, to celebrate each point. So, you know, as I've been building my business, I've really celebrated, you know, just the little things, and you know, going out for a coffee to celebrate, you know, just really taking a time to mark it with something.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking actually while you were talking then, because I was thinking about, you mentioned about, you know, what somebody else's top of the ladder is not the same as other people. And actually that goes back to an interaction that we had. I've had a few on social media looking at, particularly there's been a big increase in the profile of Down syndrome as a condition. There's a lot more people, I think, who are visible both in media, marketing, but it's more about their ability to confine to social norms that allows them, you know, it shows that, well, yes, I've got Down syndrome, but I can still be normal, I can still contribute. And there's a good number of people I work with for whom actually them achieving is being able to go to the toilet during the day. For them achieving is not having a chest infection for 2 months. Them achieving is being able to pick up a pen or lift their arm or be comfortable for a day, you know, actually. And so actually I might ditch the ladder analogy and maybe look at a pathway or something and moving along that, because I think that's much more accessible and doesn't look at, you know, trying to improve. For a lot of people, actually just being able to live their lives and their goals are not going to be the same as normal. And actually what we're trying to foster within learning disabilities is a sense of actually people are valid for what they are, not for what they can do and how normal they can be. People should be valid because they're people.
Yeah. And that is such a powerful thing. And I think, you know, this is probably where you as a physio and other healthcare professionals listening, where you're actually probably quite a natural coach, because I imagine that one of your first questions will be to understand where they are currently, and then being able to map out their next steps based on them. And, you know, part of coaching is to really delve into, okay, what does it look like and what does success look like? And then supporting someone to work out what their success is, what their next step is, what their rehabilitation path looks like to them, because it will be so personal. So yeah,
a good physio interaction should always start with what you're expecting to get from the session, because that can
and same for coaching. There we go.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know what, Charlotte? I think that is a fabulous point for us to sort of wrap things up. Just before we do, is there any other points that you wanted to bring up?
I don't think so. Just thank you so much for having me, and it's been a joy to chat all things siblings, physio, and coaching with you.
Well, thank you. I think it's been really, really interesting to reflect. And I think if people did want to find more information and find you, Charlotte, how do they connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Charlotte Flynn Coaching, and in the next couple of weeks, a Reframe, I will have a website. Not I hope to have a website. I will have a website. So I will obviously post that on Instagram, and then maybe we can add it to the show notes. Maybe that's extra motivation for me to actually get down to the admin of building it. But yeah, Instagram is my main area that I interact, and I love. Messages are so welcome in my inbox. I love to chat to people about where they are and where they want to be.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. I really appreciate giving up your time. Thank you everyone so much for listening to Tough Topics in LD, the podcast that is unplanned, unscripted, but not unprofessional. And we will see you all again next time. Bye.
Bye.